Hello, members of the class. Welcome to our lecture 11. And we're getting close to the end of the term. Looking forward to your presentations. For going to the text, this is one in which the Buddha is teaching in the Prajnaparamita Sutra. He looks out into the audience, and lo and behold, he calls the attention of the whole group to a woman who is sitting in the audience. Her name is Gangadeva. So there was this woman in the assembly named Gangadeva. Now, Kwanzaa at one time thought that this meant that this was not her name, but was her title, the goddess of the Ganges. But from looking at our text, it's very obvious that this was not a goddess figure. The Buddha recognizes what must have been like an ordinary woman. Now, I think that's the real issue here. It must have come as a surprise if we reconstruct what we think would be the event. Here are all these bodhisattvas and gods and chakras and male arhats and some lay women, to be sure, in his audience. But now he turns and actually points to one of them and says some things about her which give a whole different view, I think, of the role of women. So it tells us, and this is almost like the beginning of the Diamond Sutra, when Subhuti gets up from his seat and goes up to the Buddha. In this case, this woman, whose name is Gangadeva, arose from her seat. She uncovered her right shoulder. And that in itself raises some real issues, like a monk who uncovers one shoulder. Now, in the cultural milieu, the uncovering of the shoulder during a ritual is very important, because it means that by uncovering your shoulder, the power can go out of your body toward an icon, or you can receive power. So she uncovers her right shoulder, and she places her left knee on the ground. She does Anjali, she puts her hands together, and she says to the Buddha, "O world-honored one, I am neither startled nor afraid about this. And in the future, I will also teach these important points to living beings." I think that is an indication that this woman is very special. And she's special because she has undergone lifetimes of some kind of activity. So it means that if such a statement is made, you've got to pay attention to this woman. She's no ordinary person. She then took flowers and scatters them on the Buddha. But even this, they don't just fall to the ground, but they remain in space. And we have one of those moments when the Buddha smiles. I don't think we've probably done enough with the Buddha smile segments in sutras. What causes the Buddha to smile? And when he smiles, what's the meaning behind it? And certainly we see in these texts, people are always asking, whoa, the Buddha just smiled. Why? Why did he smile? So when she gets up and says, in the future, I'm going to teach, I'm not afraid of this, because he says, if gentle son and gentle daughter hears this message and are not afraid, not daunted by it, that's the real Prajnaparamita. And she says, well, I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't cause me any trouble. She is understanding it exactly. Now, the Buddha says, this woman, Gangadeva, will in some future stellar age, I've translated stellar age, means eons, she will become a Buddha. And her name will be Golden Flower. And then we have that cultural feature which comes into the Prajnaparamita quite often, as in other texts, in which there is a transformation of a female body in a rebirth or right on the scene from female to male, the transformation. So he says she will be reborn as a male in the world of Akshobhya Buddha. I think it's an area where we, in terms of gender studies, we have to say, well, it's not very PC to say that she's going to be reborn as a male. That was a cultural feature of the time. It's very common. And it gets added to Buddhist texts. But I believe that the Buddhist texts also give women a special status which I don't see that they have in a lot of Indian culture. Of course, you have in Tantra, the feminine is the powerful, has the power, the Shakti power. But in this case, when you hear about this woman, she's done all right as a woman through lifetime after lifetime. The Buddha now is describing what her future is, and in a little bit, he's going to talk about her past. This Buddha that she's going to become, this Buddha will be named Golden Flower, and this Buddha will have immeasurable, boundless, uncountable hearers who will enter nirvana in that world. And there will be neither any distress from fierce animals or criminals, nor travails of hunger, thirst, or disease. When she gets to become a Buddha, it's going to be a wonderful time. And innumerable thousands, millions of people will be led to nirvana. So she's going to be a powerful Buddha in the future. And this is being said to all these audience made up of mostly men. Then he talks about her past. And he says, this woman first planted wholesome roots. Now, the passage is the metaphor of planting wholesome roots. It doesn't make much sense to many of us in the present age because it's an agricultural metaphor. In order to understand it, I think you have to understand what it's like to plant rice. You know, when you plant rice, you sow the seeds in a bed, and then when the bed grow these tiny plants, you take them out, and you take one by one each tiny plant, and you replant it in the rice field. And the big question is the root of that tiny plant sufficient to catch hold and grow? You want to plant wholesome roots. Because if you don't, the little twig will just simply, sprig will die away. So he says, she planted wholesome roots, which simply means she lived in the past, in the presence of a Buddha. That's how you put down good roots. That's how you plant your roots. Who do you listen to? At whose feet did she sit? It was at the feet of no less than Dipankara Buddha. And she planted seeds which would lead to full, perfect enlightenment. Well, who else was in the presence of Dipankara Buddha and planted wholesome roots? Shakyamuni, the Buddha himself. He's really saying here, she's a peer. She and I went through the same experience, except she did it as a woman. That's why I am not trying to launder the gender issues in the sutra. It does say that in the future she'll be born as a male as a reward, if that's a reward. But in fact, what's being said here is I think, of significance, and we need to pay close attention to it. That she was and has been a woman who has planted wholesome roots, and that she has studied with the past Buddha, Dipankara, just like Shakyamuni, and that she's still, in the life in which she is currently being discussed, she is reborn as a woman, and she is able to listen to the Prajnaparamita with no fear, no distress. She is able to understand what her calling is. She stands up in front of all the audience and then bows in front of the Buddha and says, I'm not afraid. It doesn't make me concerned. I understand this, and I'm going to teach this doctrine of Prajnaparamita in the future. So the Buddha says that also a bodhisattva takes all living beings as their family. and fixes their thoughts in the samadhi of loving kindness, transcending the ties of kinship and things associated with, I think it means, kinship and family. So, in a sense, he's saying a bodhisattva takes note of all beings, including women, including this woman. And the bodhisattva practices in their meditation the samadhi of loving kindness toward all. And this loving kindness, though, is not limited to your DNA family. This loving kindness is all living beings. And he's using her, I think, as a good example for them. That they have to adjust their own thinking to this situation. After speaking to everybody in these terms about this woman, the Buddha enters into the samadhi of emptiness. And then this samadhi is said to be a portal to release. It's a doorway to being able to be released from suffering. He's finished with this little, it's almost like a sutra. It's like a mini sutra here, where a woman is the main figure, a fearless woman, one who has done exactly the same kind of planting of wholesome roots as Shakyamuni himself. And she's recognized. So, while at one level you can say in the gender relationships that Buddhism has, that women are put into an inferior position in the Indian culture very often. But in the case of Buddhism, we have to say that number one, women were allowed to become ascetic practitioners. They were allowed to be bhikshunis, nuns. They could practice the hard things. And in the Buddhist texts, we often find the list of those who were said by the Buddha to be the foremost. And the foremost group, the Oscar, we've just done the Oscars in this country, the Oscars awards in Buddhism include women who get the Oscar for being the foremost in practicing the rules of conduct, the foremost who practice ascetic activities, the foremost who practice wisdom. In other words, when you look at the foremost awards for women in the Buddhist text, it is certainly a group that have exceeded many of the issues which are said to be beyond women. Nothing is beyond Gangadeva. She has shown us in this text that there was a strong tradition, I think, within the Buddhist tradition of exalting the power and the role of women in religion. And this is a little tiny fragment in the Prajnaparamita text, which gives us this wonderful glimpse of one of these women. So she doesn't have to be the goddess of the Ganges. She just has to be who she is. A woman sitting there, unafraid, undisturbed, fully comprehending what the Prajnaparamita is teaching, dedicated to being a person who will, in the future, teach many people, lead many to nirvana. And so the Buddha, when he has done this, kind of reminds everybody, the text reminds them, this is meant for everybody, not just one gender. And so he enters into the samadhi of emptiness. There's no limitation to Prajnaparamita. There is no gender limit to it, is what I get from this. And it's this emptiness of barriers, fences, walls, ceilings, glass or otherwise, that are empty. That this emptiness is a means to access, to release, to freedom, to full perfect enlightenment. So I ask you all, when you read these sutras, to read them with great care. Sometimes you get these little gems and you just quickly read over it and say, oh yeah, sure. Yet when you go back and you really begin to look into it, you find yourself saying, wait a minute, what did I just read? What did that say? And when I do that, and when I go back and rework it and rethink it, I realize that what I have just read has a lot of significance, has a lot of potential for understanding the nature of this sutra. So thank you very much. I'll see you again when we have our next lecture, 12. Goodbye.